You're listening to RevOps FM with Justin Norris. Welcome to RevOps FM. Today we chat with Lindsay Rothlisberger, Director of Revenue Operations at Zapier, where she leads a unified team supporting sales, marketing, and customer success. And Lindsay's experience is super interesting to me because she's evolved into a RevOps role from the marketing side of the house, whereas the norm that I see is still really for RevOps leaders to come from more of a sales ops background. So as someone with a marketing background myself, I'm really interested to drill into that. And she's also working in a super fast-paced, high-volume PLG environment, and that brings a ton of interesting challenges and opportunities for things like leveraging automation. So we just have a lot of cool things to dig into today. Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Why don't we just start out with how you think about the scope and the mandate of your team? And this is something I think about a lot as an operator. Like, how do you know when your team is doing a good job? How do you know what success looks like? What's the sort of North Star that you try to keep focused on day to day?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the scope of my RevOps team here at Zapier. We are responsible on the marketing side for personalization, segmentation, and marketing tooling, as well as things like campaign operations to really make sure our customers are having the best experience possible or leveraging all of our data in the right ways. And then we are also responsible for go-to-market efficiency and productivity. So like, are we as profitable as we can be? And are we like making the best use of resources across go-to-market? And then our core like North Star metrics are around qualified opportunities in particular. So what can we do from an operations perspective, whether it be better qualification, better analytics, really optimizing the funnel to increase the number of qualified ops that we're driving. And then on the other side of the house as well, it's around revenue and sales efficiency. So how can we actually make sales as efficient as possible so that we're opening up sales capacity to be able to handle and sell more deals? And so within that realm, we're looking at things like automation and AI, strategic insights. So we have a function focused on that, tech and tooling. So like the underlying infrastructure to do all of that. And then like lead and deal management and process to make all of that flywheel run day to day. So that's kind of like a general overview of our team and the metrics in particular that we're focused on and measured by.
And you mentioned opportunities, which usually, means like a sales-led motion, but you also have, and maybe, I don't know what your percentage is, but like I'm a Zapier customer where I work, but we just pay with a credit card. We've never talked to a salesperson that I know of. Is that also within your purview, or do you view that as like a completely separate side of the business?
Yeah, it's super interesting. So when I joined Zapier 4 years ago, we did not have a sales team, and I was the first marketing ops person to join Zapier. So it was really, really interesting because I was more focused on that like customer experience and campaign operations and like how do we communicate with our customers in a way that like really makes sense for what they need and who they are. And then we really only started transitioning into a more of the sales-led motions about 2 years ago. So there's a whole slew of learnings from that experience, but really then there are two challenges. Like you're building a new sales funnel, figuring out how to leverage your vast user base and like who of those people are the right sales opportunities, and figuring out how that all fits together in terms of process and operations, et cetera. And that makeup or scope is the reason why a centralized RevOps team works so well for us at Zapier. Just because there's so much movement, like customers on a subscription model can have a certain plan type and upgrade on their own. And at what point are they ready to talk to sales? And like, we don't want to cross wires there. So the centralized RevOps function helps us like stay really aligned and making sure that our processes and our customer journey are like acting in a complementary fashion. It's a really good question.
I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Knack. I love marketing automation software, but let's be honest, the email and landing page builders are usually terrible. You can't make it nice without a developer, and marketers are going to find a way to break things or go off brand. You do not have time for that. So Knack is totally different. You set the guidelines and then give your users a building experience that's slick, modern, and beautiful. When they're done, everything goes to your map at the push of a button. And don't worry, it supports global teams, approval workflows. It's got your integrations. So head on over to revops.fm/knack. That's KNAK, and get a special offer just for my listeners. So let's dive deeper into the PLG side, just because it's such an interesting topic. I'm used to thinking of like a funnel from a sales-led point of view. You have a lead and then they're an MQL, but it's all driving towards sales and then sales owns a piece of it. Now you've got this thing where people can choose their own adventure and take all sorts of weird and wonderful paths to purchase. How do you think about that customer journey from a top level, like in the big picture?
Yeah, so it's always a work in progress, I think, with PLG. There are two main motions that we ran. We have sort of our like request a demo inbound flow on our website. So we actually organically, we have good brand recognition. We have a pretty high volume of folks who come through that funnel and raise their hand to talk to us. And I think that's a testament to like the marketing and the initiatives that we do among our user base on an ongoing basis. But then when it comes to like our existing user base, and we have so many different use cases that Zapier serves, we have a really large breadth of personas that we serve. So figuring out how to like get those folks to the right place in terms of whether they should be talking to sales or whether they should be fully self-sufficient has been a lot of experimentation. So we have hypotheses around like what types of product signals warrant like higher sales effort or might be a signal that this is our ideal customer for expansion with our sales team. So we sort of like canvas our user base and like for more of those one-to-one high-touch efforts via like an experimentation framework of like, is this our ICP for our higher price point plan? Is this a customer who's sort of bought into our product and is using it in ways that warrant more enterprise level product features like admin and security? And so we really don't want to talk to everyone in our user, like not everyone in our user base is the right fit for a high touch sales motion. So it's been a lot of experimentation to figure out not only like who are the right people who are like most likely to expand their usage of Zapier across their organization. So who are those people? And then what type of touch or outreach is going to work best for them? Is it a very high touch one-to-one sales? Is it an automated sales outreach where RevOps and marketing sort of like personalizes that one-to-one outreach because we're reaching a pretty vast user base? What is their motivation to upgrade to one of our higher tier plans? We've had to learn a lot of that through trial and error, and it's very ongoing. So we're always iterating and improving on that.
And do you think about the product as the ideal entryway for everyone? In other words, everyone should come in, they'll create an account, and then we have like a lead pool that we can observe and see like this fish looks like it's going to be a big fish, so we can try to scoop it out. Or are there some people where you really do just want to drive them directly to the request a demo flow right from the outset?
We do both. We're not doing like pure outbound, like traditional like B2B demand gen per se, where we're like acquiring lists of potential customers and like doing outreach. We really have to balance like our price point with the level of effort. So that's another pretty large role that RevOps has played, is like what should be a very like low touch, high velocity sales motion where we're closing deals in 1 or 2 days because the price point is just not where it needs to be to do that level of hands-on nurturing. So we do a little bit of more so trying to drive inbound. So we have our blog, we have advertising programs, and we really try and use those to bring folks to us in more of like an inbound fashion. But then our user base is really, really, really interesting because we've got a lot of users who come in who maybe are using Zapier for 1 or 2 use cases and don't know like all of the different opportunities by which. And so for them, marketing becomes like, how can we get them to find their next use case? And when we have enough like penetration or usage within an organization, then it warrants more of like almost like an outbounding our user base, if that makes sense. So yes, I would say in terms of like what you would think of a more traditional like B2B sales motion with PLG, it's really using our product and marketing levers combined to like drive that adoption. And then when the customer is ready, we engage with them with more of a one-to-one human touch effort.
Just thinking about it, it feels like a great way to run a business. Is it as rosy as it sounds? Like if you had to start a business today, do you like this model? Obviously every motion has its benefits, but is it all that it seems like it's cracked up to be to do business this way?
I do think so. I come from a more enterprise B2B background. I've been at large organizations, and I do think having a product where people can come in and try it and get up and running it rather quickly and solve a pain point that they have, like it's so much more powerful, I think, than what you can do with like marketing webinars and email nurtures. I think the tricky part, there are definitely some gotchas. Like as you start to expand market and bring on sales and start experimenting with those efforts, you have to figure out how your like single user product drives intercompany adoption. So like where you have multiple users and you have more people engaged with the project, it's a really, really interesting challenge because you almost have to look at how can your product drive more virality within an org to really warrant more extensive use of it, at least for us. I think for similar PLG companies who can solve very like one-to-one needs as well as like larger business needs, you have to figure that out as you go. Otherwise, the sales motion falls flat.
Maybe to make it more concrete, if we could walk through like a semi-hypothetical example, hypothetical but grounded perhaps in real-world experience. Like you have a company even of a few thousand people or even less, you might have multiple like people with different accounts within that same company. And so what signals do you look through? And then what does the seller do to like try to bring that together and create a sales-led project out of that?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And I can walk you through exactly what that looks like for us. So at Zapier, if we see that we have multiple accounts within a same organization, and when you think of this on the RevOps side, there was a lot of work that we had to do in RevOps to get our data in a place to be able to do this. So like think custom objects in the CRM to like sort of group accounts by company.
It's giving me chills just thinking about it.
Yeah, it took a long time to get where we are today, but at this point, a sales rep can look in HubSpot. We use HubSpot as our CRM, can see multiple accounts across a single domain or a single company. And at that point, they will be able to see, okay, what contacts do I have at this account? Is it someone with enough buying authority or who may be interested in like having a conversation about how we might consolidate that account into a larger account, and then also bring more people in the organization onto the account. So then the sales motion becomes, okay, I've identified these companies where we have several users. Do we have like maybe a director or an IT person in the product? And oftentimes that's not the case. And then you think of like multi-threading. And so your sales motion becomes very much like, okay, how do I then find the IT person or the director and bridge that? So that's one example. We also use product signals in other ways where, for example, if RevOps is one of our like key personas, if we have someone in RevOps who's using Zapier for a pretty like critical CRM integration, but they're not really maybe getting the value out of Zapier that they could be, we might engage them one-to-one and offer input into like other automation opportunities and expand the account that way.
Do you have like a framework that you give your sellers? Like sometimes, either when I've been on the RevOps side or I've had some past experience as a pre-sales solution consultant, you kind of know like, this is what my path looks like. Like first I engage with persona 1, and then I got to get persona 2 on board, and then persona 3, and maybe there's a few different routes, but you sort of have this knowledge of 1, 2, 3. Is there something like that? Or is every account like a unique snowflake that you need to figure out?
Yes, we've definitely been working on that exact framework and trying to map it out in a way that is like clear and repeatable for our sales team. So what's cool is I have a sales enablement person sitting within the RevOps team. So our sales enablement person is able to bridge not only the process and how to gaps associated with that, but also the strategy around stakeholder engagement and engaging the right users within an account around what they care about. So yeah, we sort of have a very like basic framework for like, this is what the IT person cares about. And you go to them if this is the playbook, or this is what the end user, what we call like the automator, really cares about, the person building in Zapier. And here's how you sort of elevate them to engage the director or lead of their department. So I would say this is still very much a work in progress. So our framework isn't completely solid, but we're starting to make progress on how that looks like to really penetrate within an account.
It's a fascinating challenge in a way, especially because you could have a sales-led part of the process, maybe with some automation involved, and then maybe like a marketing-led part of the process. Is your team having total visibility over all that to like keep them coordinated, or how do you think about that problem?
That is what has become so interesting, I think, in this world, is like the lines become very blurred between marketing and sales because of like our user base, and because it's quite large. Sales cannot possibly engage everyone who meets our ideal customer profile for a enterprise level plan. So marketing really helps to like drive those meetings or opportunities for the sales team. But I think RevOps plays this really interesting role where we can see it all, right? So sales leads their own motions as well, and they have ideas for how they're going to engage customers. And marketing has experiments that they're running. And so without unified RevOps, I don't know how this would work, because our marketing ops folks, I can go back to our team structure a little bit, but we have 3 folks dedicated specifically to sort of like the umbrella of marketing ops and like lead management. And they basically own the process up until a lead becomes a qualified opportunity. So they book a meeting and then they are deemed qualified as a deal. And then our sales ops folks, we have 2 people dedicated to like the sales process and like deal management. And those 2 groups are just like this. It's actually more crucial for them to be aligned, in my opinion, than like for us to be aligned to marketing, just because of how quickly that transition can happen. And also like how many different motions and experiments we're running. There's just too much risk to the customer for RevOps not to play a pretty like deep role in overseeing all of it.
To make that a little bit more real, what is an example or like a mechanism through which, like a day-to-day basis, does RevOps actually protect the customer from those sorts of like inconsistent or weird experiences that could easily happen?
Unfortunately, it's probably more manual than I would prefer it to be, but I think that's because we're just moving really quickly and trying a lot of new motions and things. So we have actually like a small working group, which includes like a sales person, a sales manager, a sales ops person, a marketing ops person, and a marketing person. And they form this little tiger team that when it comes to finding opportunities among our user base, they've got like a campaign plan and schedule. And so they try to create a lot of transparency and like collaboration. But RevOps plays a pretty large role in helping to facilitate that and helping to stay somewhat neutral in terms of what's working and what's not. So if we launch a campaign to our user base, for example, and we drive a ton of meetings, but deals are stalling and they're just not closing as like quickly as we would like them to, we have this little working group that can say, let's diagnose this. Why? Is it because of who we targeted in the campaign? Or is it because maybe the message sent a message that wasn't really helpful when it didn't really translate well into the sales motion and what we were actually trying to sell the customer? So right now we're sort of doing it in a more manual, like smaller working group style way. But I've noticed like when RevOps is not involved, you see a lot more friction there, like among sales and marketing of like, oh, well, we need better sales enablement because the deals aren't closing, and then marketing. So they sort of tend to like talk past each other. And I just find that RevOps can play like such a strong role in not only unifying go-to-market, but also like offering a perspective that like takes into account the like challenges across both marketing and sales.
Kind of couples therapist almost.
Totally. It can be stressful, but it is rewarding. I've just found that like communication is literally the most important skill that I've needed to have as a RevOps leader, at least. It's really, RevOps as a function can be really, really powerful at aligning go-to-market and driving just an amazing customer experience. It takes a lot of strong communication and like navigating conflict and all of those things. It's definitely something I've learned in the last couple of years.
That is so true. And people think of it in many ways as like a technical function or like a process function, but the ability to get people on board and call out those problems and be like Switzerland, like you mentioned, be neutral and be seen as like this trusted person that can kind of arbitrate these conflicting demands. Do you find having a unified structure helps with that because you're not embedded in any one of the functions? You can be that neutral force?
Absolutely. I think that was a game changer for us. So we only moved to a unified RevOps function 2 years ago when our sales motion really started to pick up. I reported directly into the CMO prior to that. So I was in the marketing ops function. So I think it has been really instrumental in growing our go-to-market and maturing our go-to-market, really. Just having the autonomy, I think, to really focus on like this intersection between customer experience and profitability. There's no one focused on that otherwise. Teams sort of have specific goals that they're trying to meet that don't take into the account like drawbacks like, oh, well, this is a great motion, but it's taking our sales team 100 days to close these deals. And that's just not going to work for us. It's not something that we can scale. The role RevOps plays for us is like, how do we find repeatability that we can scale? And having someone overseeing that, I think, has really been successful. And it's elevated us as a function. Like we get a seat at the table because we bring that perspective in a way that I didn't necessarily get in other marketing ops roles, at least in my experience.
Who do you report into now?
So I report into the CRO for the length of our RevOps time since we existed in the org, but our CRO just left. So for now, I'm reporting into our VP of sales. And normally, at first I was concerned about that. Our VP of sales is very, very understanding of the importance of the RevOps function. And so through this transition, and this was just like in the last couple of weeks, it's actually been interesting because I've been more intentional then about marketing and being more involved there. So I'm also like a part of the marketing leadership team. So while I report into sales now, I am embedded within the marketing leadership function to help bridge that. And I think that can work long term. I'm not sure if that will be what it is for us long term, but I would say reporting to the CRO did work very well and was probably ideal.
Was your CRO overseeing all the go-to-market functions, or was he just a sales leader?
Yes, he oversaw marketing, sales, and support and partnerships. So a pretty big scope.
Last November, I watched as my LinkedIn feed blew up with posts from people at Mopsapalooza. They were raving about the conference and having the best time. Don't miss out like I did. This November, Mopsapalooza is back in sunny Anaheim, California, and it's going to be the marketing ops event of the year, packed with hands-on learning from real practitioners. This is the only truly community-led, tech-agnostic MOPS conference out there. It's got the best speakers, the best networking, the best social events, maybe even a trip to Disneyland. This isn't your 50,000-person tech company conference. It's an intimate gathering of folks who are in the trenches every day, and registration is capped at 700 attendees. Tickets are going growing fast, so go to revops.fm/mops. That's revops.fm/MOPS to sign up today. We've touched a little bit on the structure of your team, but just digging into it, you wrote a great blog post, which I'll link in the show notes, about your transition to RevOps, and you sketched out an org structure there. I don't know if it's evolved since then, but maybe just walk us through the branches of the tree.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It has evolved a little bit organically, but I'll explain that a bit more in a second. I think what we really wanted to do is we wanted to have a level of specialization where someone could really be deeply embedded with marketing, sales, and customer success. We didn't want to lose that deep connection with what those teams' strategies are. Let me back up. We have an operations function, and those are like the day-to-day automators, process builders, campaign ops, deal lead management. But as you heard at Zapier, we are pretty experimental in finding out like what motions to scale from a sales perspective. So they're very like agile. I would say like lead assignments change, prioritization of leads change quite often. So our operations function is sort of like core builders. They're the ones who are in the CRM day-to-day, building workflows, automating. And then we have the planning and analytics function. And so this is the smallest part of our group. And this is another interesting nuance in being in a PLG company where we have a really large data org and we have a really large finance org. So we've had to carve out like where RevOps plays within that org structure. So we actually only have one person dedicated to analytics across the funnel. And they're sort of responsible for like obsessing over the funnel, like where are the breaking points, where are leads dropping off. And again, that's across everything. And then we have a sales enablement person. And then we have somebody who oversees our tech stack. And this is actually just one person, probably because she's absolutely amazing. But she makes sure that the data that we need is syncing in and out of our tools and our systems are integrated in a way that facilitates this great customer experience and motions that we've been talking about today. But within the operations function, that's our largest group, and those are the automators. We have 3 folks dedicated to marketing ops, 2 dedicated to sales ops, and 1 dedicated to CS ops. And those 5 are very in sync and have just a lot of overlap, coordination, and crossover.
One of the things that occurs to me is there's this expression that a friend of mine uses that I really like. And he talks about run the business versus change the business. Whereas with like run the business, you're really executing existing process or making adjustments, but it's primarily about keeping the business running forward in its current state. Then you have other folks that are focused on what can we improve? Let's figure that out. Let's initiate new projects. Does that sort of split out that paradigm neatly between the operations team and let's say the person that's in planning and analytics? Or is the operations team divided between, let's say, like day-to-day recurring stuff and then strategic projects that might change the state of business as usual?
I love that way of looking at it. Our operations team is a mix of both. So they're doing the day-to-day running the business, but then they're also working on larger strategic projects. I will say that if we did all of the projects that our stakeholders requested of us, we would never work on those larger strategic projects. So we say no a lot. We force trade-offs a lot. And so, yes, they're running the business. And when I say running the business, it's more of like deal hygiene and making sure that campaigns are being launched and making tweaks to lead management when we see a bug come through, et cetera. They're doing those things, but I would say they're more, because of the stage of growth that Zapier is at, they are probably more aligned with the strategic projects and more so prioritizing sort of bigger bets. Could we figure out how to solve this drop-off point where we have people coming inbound and they're not actually engaging with our chat? We have a chat team, a sales team that just does chat. It's a high velocity motion. And so they might have a project in marketing ops to figure out how to reduce that friction and make sure that like those leads are not dropping off. So they will have like other strategic projects like that. We also have a lot of AI projects that we sort of like position as strategic because we view those as helping us learn and grow and figure out the next phase of what RevOps could be. But we definitely have to make room for that stuff. And that is just like lots of transparency with our stakeholders, lots of trust building, lots of communication about like why these things are important.
So thinking about that prioritization and kind of planning process, is that like yearly, quarterly, monthly sprints? Do the teams have autonomy or do you centralize it with you guiding it? How do you think about where the team should focus their time?
Luckily for us, we are pretty deeply embedded in the teams that we support. So like, for example, I go to the marketing leadership meetings. Myself and a member of my team go to the sales leadership meetings. And so I feel like we have a pretty strong pulse on what the biggest challenges are at a strategic level. However, what we tend to do is operate on more of like a monthly commit framework where we have this overarching roadmap that we create on a half yearly basis where we say, okay, these are the big things that we need to figure out this half. But because of how agile and new a lot of our motions are, we find that operating like on a monthly commit framework, and those monthly commits, they're not exhaustive of everything we're doing, but we go to the sales and marketing and CS leadership and we say, these are the 2 things we're going to get done this month. This is what we're committing to delivering, and this is the business impact that it's going to drive. And so that might just be like 1 or 2 things across marketing, sales, and CS that we commit to, and we can shift. If something changes, we don't mind pulling that out or getting feedback and swapping things around just to make sure we're aligned. But we've found that planning too far out, like the roadmap gets pulled and changed so much, the team loses morale. So we found that just being more agile up front works for us.
In a high velocity, high growth organization, it can kind of be a waste of time to plan too far out. That's what I've observed too.
Yeah.
It's not worth the paper that it's written on anymore. You mentioned impact, and that can be something that is difficult for some revenue operators to like aside from saying we closed so many tickets or we launched so many campaigns or we did so many projects, really tying your work to impact. How do you think about that?
We use 2, frameworks for how we do this. One is, did we add new functionality or capabilities? It's a little bit trickier sometimes to tie to revenue, but if we can unlock a huge motion and literally do something that we couldn't do before, like outbounding, for example, if you don't have the tools to do that, you can't do it. So we will sometimes latch on to like features or capabilities as like business value or business impact that we're delivering. And then we do also try to speak about our wins under the lens of additional sales capacity or selling time or like ROI on marketing dollars spent. Like we will, even if it doesn't have to be scientific in most cases, like I think you can really get the point across about your value as an organization if you're just making sure that you include that. Why was this worth it? Because we saved you from hiring another salesperson, basically, because now you're working deals that are going to close. You're spending a less amount of time closing those deals. We really try and focus on like what's the profitability that we drove, like whether it be additional sales capacity or like just time saved, which is pretty easy to like put some math behind and say like that equals this in revenue. And that doesn't even include additional deals won. It's literally just like time we've saved per employee.
And it sounds like you're also thinking a lot about things like deal cycle length, deal value. I mean, that's one of the really nice things I like about PLG, and I've had some past experience working for a PLG company myself, that the automations that you can drive actually can like directly impact revenue from a direct response point of view. Like you roll out a new automation and then more people put their credit card down. And that's a really cool feeling that a lot of folks in an enterprise context don't always get.
100%. It's really rewarding to be able to see a small automation or optimization lead directly to revenue rather quickly, especially for some of the higher velocity, low touch motions that we just had one very recently where our marketing ops person was like, hey, I think if we add another like automated sales touch for this lead type, I think we could drive like a lot of revenue. And it was like insane. She launched, it was very small, very easy to do. And it like closed a gap and it equated to pretty significant like additional revenue number. So there's just so much opportunity, I think, like when you have the volume and like the funnel to like, we say obsess over, because there's so many like potential drop-off points, which also makes the job harder too, because you really have to prioritize and make the right bets.
So I want to geek out a little bit on like technology and data topics, because you're in an automation space. Let's maybe start with, you mentioned you're using HubSpot for your CRM. Is that also your marketing automation platform?
Yes, it is. Our tool stack is interesting. So we have had to, this was like such a tough decision when I first joined. We have Iterable, which is our email tool, it's a mass personalization email tool. It's really good at making hyper personalized email experiences. So we had Iterable when I joined. We're starting to like experiment with human touch and sales, brought on the CRM on HubSpot, but we also didn't really have a true marketing automation platform because we weren't like really doing like B2B marketing. We were doing like more of a like B2C, right? Like a more of a one-to-one. So yes, brought on HubSpot marketing automation and CRM, and it's continued to scale for us, which is pretty cool. And then we use Intercom for chat, and then Gong, LinkedIn Sales Nav, Looker for analytics, and Chili Piper to help with like our lead management and like instant booking capabilities.
It's interesting that you mentioned that HubSpot has continued to scale for you, because I think there is this perception in the marketplace like, yeah, it's HubSpot, it's good, but at a certain point you'll have to migrate. And I had a chat with a fellow named Rich Archbold, who actually is the head of engineering for HubSpot's own internal GTM systems. And of course they use HubSpot too. And I asked that same question, like, is it scaled for them? So if it's scaled for them, so maybe there is this misperception in the marketplace. What have you found in terms of like scaling your business on HubSpot? Any challenges, or is it actually maybe the grass is sort of greener over here for some Salesforce folks?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like we constantly go back and forth and debate. HubSpot has a great user experience. Like in customer experience, we really just love the team over there, and just have had a great account manager for a long time, technical support. And so we've really stretched the limits, I would say, of HubSpot CRM, where we've got custom objects and we're using like all of the new features as soon as they release them to like be able to customize our sales process. But I would say it's hard for us to predict the future, but for now we have fairly simple and straightforward sales motions that we're iterating and proving out. And so for our use case, it works really well for that. Some of the gaps that we've had are just probably mostly around some integrations just are tailor-made for Salesforce. But for us who use Zapier in our back pocket for everything, like we've been able to use Zapier to like sort of enhance our integrations. For example, with Intercom, like Intercom to HubSpot is fine, but like we have a pretty customized workflow of how our sales team uses Intercom, and then how those leads get pushed through to like other reps and customer success managers. So we use Zapier for that integration, or to like augment that integration. And again, I think we use Zapier for a lot of different things across our go-to-market. So the combination of, and I, of course, didn't even mention Zapier as part of our tool stack, but it combined with HubSpot it allows for a very customized experience, and it's working for us.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's cool. And I think the basics of creating a Zap are probably pretty familiar to most people who understand like if this then that type of functionality. One of the things I'm curious about is when you start to roll out automations at a larger company approaching enterprise scale, it seems to me that it could get hairy in the sense of like, the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing and Zaps contradicting each other, overriding each other. What's the kind of governance or like building framework, the architecture that you put in place to keep that series of automations coherent?
So Zapier now does at least have like admin capabilities. And so we have in our account, like we have oversight over what apps are like connected to what and what workflows are doing at a high level and reporting around that. And so we have a member of our team owns integrations at a whole and can see across all of our integrations, like what's being updated by Zapier versus what is like a native integration or what might be being updated by our ETL. So that's really through like documentation and having a single body, like overseeing that full ecosystem. But I would say like the ways that we use Zapier in addition to like integrations tied to our CRM are more of like little mini applications to enhance our CRM that wouldn't have competing workflows. So for example, we have a series of Zaps that is a little like sales enablement application. And what it does is it looks at all of our like Gong transcripts, so all of our call transcripts. It takes that data, it has an AI step that our sales enablement person set up that says like, okay, look at these calls and give some constructive feedback for the rep. Did they nail their negotiation or like objection handling or like, did they talk about the Zapier value proposition? And that all goes into a Zapier table that then each sales manager has access to and can like quickly glance, okay, what are the learnings I need to like really like nail down with each member of my team and one-on-ones this week. And so that's an example of something that we built with Zapier that customizes our CRM and connects some of our different tools. But I'm not so worried about that Zap conflicting with something else. So I think the integration layer is like one, but then there's also the sales efficiency enablement layer of things that we use Zapier for that is a little bit more the Wild West, to be honest. Like I let the team do what you need to do, try and figure out, let's find some cool use cases here. And we haven't had an issue yet, but the oversight is important, definitely, for those like system of record updates.
I'd love to see a screenshot of that Zap you described because I was trying to build something very similar. So save me some time. The like Gong transcript to AI to table workflow. That would be very handy.
Awesome. I'll follow it.
I'm really curious about like CRM data model and product signals and data. You mentioned having a custom object for like accounts. Maybe let's just talk through like how that's linked together and then how you're providing visibility on product signals to users of the CRM.
So this was tough when we initially brought on a sales motion, because not only do they need access to data to like have good conversations with their customers, like they need to know how their customers are using Zapier today to be able to have an effective like sales conversation. So that's one. But then when it comes to like finding those moments in time when a customer is ripe for expansion or where like human touch could be really valuable, we're super reliant on product signals for that. The challenging thing is we have a lot of product signals and we need them in real time or near real time. And that wasn't a capability for us in terms of like our data architecture until more recently, until we brought on sales and really had to like be intentional about that. But it can be very expensive. You can't send all of that data in real time. So you have to be really smart about like what data matters, what data you need in real time versus when just 24 hours is fine. And then we can use our normal sync. What we do, it kind of varies depending on the product signal, but we do sometimes use Zapier to send a product signal into HubSpot in particular to like validate and see, is this signal leading to the outcomes that we want? Like, are those sales conversations successful? So with the product signal side of it, that has been looped into that motion that I mentioned earlier, where we have the Tiger team who figures out what product signals matter. And that's why it's so important for RevOps to be in the room so that we can help orchestrate the data to do that. Because in most cases, we don't have all the data in our CRM necessarily. Like at this point, we've got the things that we know matter, like someone activated a Zap or somebody connected a system of record or a CRM, things like that, we've had to orchestrate and build over time once we validated that worked.
Do you have a separate table of product signals, or do you have just fields on the HubSpot contact record or account record? Where does that sort of data live?
It varies. It typically does live in our CRM at the contact level. So at the contact level, a user takes a specific action. It's synced over into HubSpot. It might run a workflow that activates a campaign like a automated sales outreach. In a lot of cases too, there's a whole process that needs to run where say it's the signal is a Zap was activated, or specific type of Zap activated by user, send signal to HubSpot CRM attached to user, assign a user as a lead to a particular sales rep, send an automated sales outreach email if that's what we want to do. In some cases, we might actually send sales a notification and then they will reach out. So it depends on the campaign. But then we also aggregate those product signals at the company level or at the organization level so that when a rep is looking at an account, it can see like, oh, well, this account has 5 Zaps activated around this particular use case, so that they can also have like a good and like productive conversation with that company. But it's taken us a lot of time and really like focused effort, not only to figure out like what signals, but like how quickly we need them, how we're going to orchestrate them. Do we want to use Zapier? Do we want to use High Touch, our ETL, or some other way? So it's been definitely a work in progress.
The roles and responsibilities of different systems gets really complex when you have multiple options and paths and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another area we have a sort of a working group. So we have a data warehouse engineer and someone on our team in RevOps and a product manager who actually like oversees our platforms, like internal infrastructure. And so they form a little working group where RevOps plays this role where we're translating business needs into technical requirements. So like in the past, I think without RevOps in this situation, I think it would be really challenging for the data warehouse engineer to understand, do we need this in real time? Sales is always going to say, yeah, we need it in real time. But RevOps plays this really like complementary role in that scenario where we can like really look at like, what does the business need in this scenario? What is the path of least resistance to get there? And how do I coordinate with data and engineering on that? And if you think about too, like product signals and new products, sometimes we won't even have the event that measures that signal available, in which case we need an engineer to go build that. And so I could probably do a whole session, or someone on my team who focuses on this could do a whole session on like the evolution of that relationship. But we do have some standardization now where we know if it's this type of product signal for this type of campaign, it's going to be set up in this way. So
that is so interesting, and we could probably go a lot deeper down that path, but I know we are out of time. And I just want to say thank you for popping the hood and taking us inside the engine that you built. It's super cool, and it honestly sounds like a lot of fun. So I hope it's as enjoyable as it sounds like day to day.
Absolutely. I have an amazing team, so it's all them. But it's been a really, really fun, intellectually challenging experience to like transition from B2B marketing to something like this. But we're going to see a lot of companies start to go this route. So I'm honored and grateful that I've had the opportunity to learn in this case. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Hey everyone, I want to invite you over to the RevOps FM Substack community, where you can sign up to get rough transcripts, show notes, longer form articles, and other bonus content. Just head over to revops.fm/subscribe to get free access. I'd also love to know what you thought of the episode and to hear suggestions for topics you want to learn about. Feel free to leave a comment on Substack or send me an email at justin@revops.fm. Thanks for listening.